What's going on, everybody? Welcome into this edition of Warchant TV. I'm Aslan Hajavandi, joined by managing editor of Warchant.com, Ira Schoffel. Warchant.com, your ultimate Seminoles sports source. Hit that like button below, folks. Spike it and like it and spike it. I think Tom and Jeff have some cool sort of slogan that goes along with it, but just click that thumbs up button. We certainly would appreciate it. Even the lower right corner, if you get a subscribe, that would be super cool as well. Ira, we covered practice this week. Thought we're heading to the home stretch. NC State, 19th ranked, first ranked team coming into Doak Campbell since Notre Dame in week one. And then in the middle of the afternoon, I'm sure you're probably enjoying maybe your lunch. You deserve a lunch break every now and then, big guy. And we get news that Chubba Purdy has entered the transfer portal. I guess let's first get to the surprising factor. How would you say you reacted to that news? I was surprised. I don't know if you were.
Yeah, I mean, the timing more than anything. Back in the spring and the summer, there were a lot of people that were wondering about Chubba Purdy's status with the program. The fact that Jordan Travis kind of came on late last season. He's a younger quarterback. He's going to have time if he wins the starting job. They brought in Mackenzie Milton. Chubba went home for the spring. Wasn't even at practices or meetings. I mean, he went home to rehab from his shoulder surgery. So there was a lot of speculation at that point. But then once he came to camp, and then came into the season and practiced every day for a few months. I think everybody was surprised for it to happen now with only 4 games left. And after 10 days ago, getting his first action of the season, completing 5 passes, leading FSU on 3 touchdown drives. It just seems the timing of it seems really odd. But in the big picture of things, I mean, you consider the fact that Jordan Travis appears to be their starting quarterback at least for the rest of the season, maybe going into next season. They also have another quarterback coming in, AJ Duffy. I assume Chubba Purdy thought, well, I want to start at quarterback somewhere, and if it's not going to be here, I'll go somewhere else. So the decision's not shocking, but the timing's a little surprising.
I mean, we had seen in recent weeks him kind of make a little bit of a move, I guess, into possibly being the primary backup. He and Mackenzie Milton were splitting reps when they both were out there. It seems like with the twos. I mean, I wasn't under the impression that he was the number 2 quarterback. I mean, are we to assume that maybe he thought he was, and maybe there's been sort of a change in his mind of where he stands with this program? Again, I mean, I'm very surprised by the decision because, again, Milton's gone after this season. Jordan Travis, if he plays against NC State, that would be 4 straight weeks he's played. I mean, he's not a guy that's really shown himself to be all that durable, and Chubba's well aware of when they're both practicing and when they're not able to practice. So that sort of just left me for a loop, it feels like.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think he's gotten better, but I've never felt like, and I mean, you're out there at practice a lot as well. I mean, I've never felt like, just from watching, and I'm not going to pretend to be a quarterback expert that I know everything the quarterbacks are supposed to do or what perfect technique is and all that. I just can tell you who moves the offense, and when Jordan Travis is in practice, the offense moves. When Mackenzie Milton is in practice at quarterback, the offense moves. When Chubba and Tate are in there, it doesn't move as much, and there tends to be more turnovers and things like that. So I've never felt at any point that he was a better option than either Jordan Travis or Mackenzie Milton. So, whether it's because he doesn't fit in this offense perfectly, whether it's because he's homesick, I mean, who knows what the reason is? It's just never seemed to really click. No, I thought the only way to me Chubba was the second team quarterback for this team right now was if they got in a situation where they had to have a mobile quarterback because they didn't feel good about the offensive line. Say last week against Clemson, this week against NC State. You'd be concerned about Mackenzie Milton behind a banged up, not great offensive line against a very good defensive front. And, so that would have been the reason Chubba might have been the first guy off the bench. But no, I mean, from everything we've seen at every practice, he's been their third best quarterback.
So, I mean, as you pointed out there, it just seems like this is probably not the ideal way to finish out the season if you're Florida State, because you have sort of tailored this offense, it seems like, around Jordan Travis. And I know we spoke to Mike Norvell after practice on Wednesday, and he was kind of talking about it really isn't any different in terms of what they try to do midseason with, self-scouting and developing new tendencies and throwing in wrinkles, whether it's a primarily running quarterback or what have you. But it just seems like, and to your point, man, like, if Jordan can't play a game for whatever reason, if he has to exit a game because he gets hurt, things that we've seen in his past, it just seemed like Chubba was maybe the more seamless transition. And then with Mackenzie, you can't really run. You can run more of what Jordan wants to do with Chubba than you can with McKenzie. Should you be concerned if you're a Florida State fan at this point about where your quarterback depth is? Is it more of a concern of the depth short term or long term, do you think?
I think definitely short term. I mean, look, in college football in 2021, it's rare to have quarterbacks that are around the same age and just stick with it. I mean, there's just too many colleges out there that are looking for quarterbacks. Chubba Purdy will be a somewhat desirable prospect on the transfer portal, we would assume. And so he was a 4-star prospect coming out of high school. So particularly those schools out west that were real interested in him earlier. He was earlier committed to Louisville. So there will be other schools who are interested in him. And it's hard for quarterbacks it's just hard to keep several quarterbacks that are all underclassmen. So now this maybe opens things up for Tate Rodemaker to stay. I think Tate Rodemaker might have been a guy if Chubba Purdy, because they're classmates, if Chubba had stayed and Tate's behind Chubba, maybe Tate would have looked to leave. He still might, because he looks at Jordan Travis and AJ Duffy and thinks maybe those guys are the future. So, there's that all has to be determined long term. To me, the bigger concern is short term. And it's just because, to the point you made, Jordan Travis has not been the most durable quarterback. McKenzie Milton, who is his top backup, is not as mobile as he once was. You don't have a great offensive line. And then, Tate Rodemaker is also a guy who's not super mobile. He's athletic, he can run, but he's not real elusive in the pocket. And so McKenzie isn't the guy he used to be. So from that standpoint, winning these last 4 games, that gets more difficult without Chubba Purdy, just in case something happens. But, these games are going to be tough anyway. And I think that's, the one thing I wanted to touch on. I don't know if you were going to bring it up or not, but like from a perception standpoint, this is one that's probably going to hurt more than it will from a tangible standpoint, just because, Mike Norvell, Chubba Purdy was the first big quarterback he signed here. Jeff Sims had been committed to Florida State. There's always been a perception that he chose Chubba Purdy over Jeff Sims. Jeff Sims has had a pretty good career so far at Georgia Tech. Hasn't been tremendous. They've lost plenty of games. He's had plenty of turnovers, but he's also put up a lot of yards in both running and passing. So now the guy that you went with has left, and you don't have Jeff Sims anymore, obviously. So from that standpoint, I think from a perception standpoint, it hurts. Also, you just lost to Clemson to drop to 3-5. NC State, you're going to be an underdog. You're going to be 3-6. They're going to be an underdog against Florida. They might be an underdog against Miami. If you finish the season 4-8 and you lost the quarterback that your first big quarterback signee, again, it's not good from a perception standpoint. But I don't think in the long term it's a big impact on Florida State's football team.
It's just crazy to that perception point, I guess, is that he's a guy that you assume at worst is probably going into 2022 as a sophomore as your primary backup, again, to a guy that really hasn't shown the ability to stay healthy for an entire football season. And for you to walk away from that at Florida State mid-season, I guess, is going to create some of that sort of perception issues,
But doesn't that tell you?
Talk about.
But doesn't that tell you how college football has changed? It used to be being at Florida State was a huge deal, or being at any big school. But then you see it all the time, man. These guys, they could be the number 2 at LSU, the number 2 at wherever, and they, get beat out at Wisconsin. They transfer, beat out at, it's just that's how college football is with quarterbacks. Nobody is willing to be the backup and just wait for their chance.
Yeah, the Wisconsin stuff, those are guys that got one last season. To be a sophomore to leave this quickly, again, when everything seems right. But I guess to your point, there is a lot of tumult going, a lot of turnover. A guy like Spencer Rattler,
right.
I mean, his father said that he's going to be with the team until January 12th or whatever the date of the college football championship game is, because he could maybe slide back into the starting lineup at this point. But yeah, when the writing's on the wall. But I don't know, man. I mean, I guess if you want to be on the bright side, maybe the writing is on the wall that this program really believes in Jordan Travis, and Chubba doesn't think he can beat him. So I guess that could be your positive spin on these sort of things.
Also, I mean, didn't a young quarterback in Tennessee just go in, a 5-star kid?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just it's how it is. But yeah, I mean, to that point, again, I don't know what Chubba was in his mind about, like, whether or not he thinks he should have been on the field against Clemson, or if he thinks he should be on the field over McKenzie Milton, whatever his thought process. I'm sure his family thinks he should play. I mean, everybody's family thinks they're the best option. So maybe he's getting it from family as well. But again, I've been at every single practice, all preseason camp and all season, and I've never once thought that he was a better option than either Jordan or McKenzie.
Could be a gamer though. Could be one of those gamers that turns it on in a
Could
game.
be because of those 5 passes against UMass. I mean, I'm not trying to kill the kid. I'm only saying this. I'm not trying to run him down. I'm only saying this because we're at practice and the fans are not.
Right.
So the only time they've seen him was 5 passes against UMass that he completed. And I'm just telling you that at practice, and everybody wants to say, well, that's just practice. Maybe he's a gamer. You have to go by what you see at practice because that's how you determine who plays in games. And I'm not saying I agree with everything that this coaching staff does at every position. There are guys on this team that I think should play more, and there are guys on this team that I think should play less. So it's not like I agree with everything they're doing, but I don't think they got anything wrong with this quarterback situation.
Last thing on the way out, Ira, looking at the big picture, longer term, I don't know where you were in terms of the likelihood that this staff was going to maybe dip back into the portal and try to get somebody at the quarterback position. But whatever I was at, I thought it was probably a good possibility. That now has probably gone to a probability, I would think. Do you think this affects the likelihood they do go into the portal to get another quarterback?
I do, and I really think it's going to depend on what's out there. I mean, if they could get a guy who is a possible surefire starter, you have to try to improve your football team. As much as they like Jordan Travis, if somebody came into the portal who was a sure thing, like De'Ara King last year, I know he got hurt this year, but a guy who has proven at a high level, you have no doubts he could be the guy and could beat out Jordan Travis, then you go for that. If it's a journeyman, somebody who's, again, like those Wisconsin transfers, to me, I wouldn't be as appealing. That wouldn't be as appealing unless they were coming to be a backup. I would be looking more towards a young quarterback, like the guys you mentioned, who are younger quarterbacks that have a lot of talent, but they don't want to wait their turn. So now, but they might be more willing to wait a year or to come in and at least compete. So I like that would be what I would consider. The one thing to remember about that also is the one-time transfer rule. It is a free agency basically now with quarterbacks. Players can transfer and play it automatically right away, but it's a one-time transfer policy. So if a quarterback transfers to Florida State and doesn't win the job, he can't just transfer to another Division I school and play right away. They're a little bit more locked in. So maybe you do feel more comfortable with a guy who thinks he's going to start, but may end up not winning the job. But I mean, they definitely. I think they definitely need to get one. But I think it's going to depend on like what's available, which route they go.
There we go. Plenty more information available over at warchant.com on the Tribal Council. Use that promo code WARCHANT30 for a 30 free day trial. We'll have a live edition of Wake Up Warchant at 5:45 here on Wednesday with myself and Corey Clark. So you've heard from Jeff, you heard from Tom, you heard from Ira. You'll also hear from Corey here in a few hours. So do stay tuned and connected with Warchant TV. Ira, thanks for your time, man.
Thanks, buddy.